Welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast, where Kay Nicole delivers a daily dose of inspiration by discussing passion, purpose, and struggle with people who are living their best life doing what they love. Here's Nicole.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast. Tonight I have Nick Janicki. He is the founder and owner of True Rest Float Spa. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. I'm excited to be on.
Awesome. So I want to start off by asking you a really weird question. It's not really weird, but it's just left field. So tell us about the worst job that you've ever had.
The worst job I've ever had. Wow, what an interesting question. So here's the beauty of being an entrepreneur is I forgot what it was like to have a normal job. So that's a good thing, right? But
Wow.
I would say the worst job, it wasn't even that bad of a job, but I used to work at Brookstone in the mall in my 20s for about 2 years. And it wasn't a bad job, but it could be very boring. And so if it wasn't Christmas season, I remember sitting around in April and just literally there'd be one person that walks in every 2 hours. So, it's kind of lose your mind boring. Though the good part about that is I did learn how to juggle really, really well during the slow periods. But I would say that was the worst job just because of it just wasn't very engaging, right?
That's interesting. All right. So when did you start your company and what was the catalyst for the journey into entrepreneurship?
So I started the company in 2008, technically, and then we actually were able to open the brick and mortar location in February 2010. And really, what facilitated it was a couple things. One is I sort of have always had an entrepreneurial background, and so I'm kind of one of those people that would be at a job for 2 to 4 years, and then once I felt like I mastered it, if there was a glass ceiling and there wasn't anywhere else to go, I was just bored and I was ready to have a new challenge. And so for me, entrepreneurship was kind of that never-ending, ongoing challenge. And I tell people sarcastically that I'm only happy if I'm learning something new and failing at it. So for me, life's really about the journey, not necessarily the destination. So I continue to fail in a good way, right? And so then can learn new things. And so we started True Rest Float Spa in 2010. And this was at a time when there was only about 14 locations, believe it or not, in the entire North American continent that offered flotation therapy. So there was one in Canada, and actually I think about 14 in the United States. So when we dove in, my wife and I, we tried it out. My senses were revived. It was kind of like I had a really deep meditation experience. Was just in this super euphoric mood for a couple days and thought, wow, if someone actually made this a high-end spa-like service, this could be the next Massage Envy. And so from there, that's when we wrote the business plan. And, I basically asked my wife, hey, do you want to max out all of our credit cards, take all the money out of our 401k, take the money out of our house, and be incredibly broke and work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week? And I think she said, oh, hell no. Okay, sure. So that was kind of how we started. But
Oh my gosh. So what makes one feel confident enough to go balls to the wall, max out your credit cards, take all your money out of savings and put it into a business? Like, what told you that this was going to work?
that's a great question. Nothing told me this was going to work other than the service itself just worked. And so when I did that float, I'd floated, I think, 2 or 3 times before I just went all in. And it was just amazing. And so it was one of those few things that you do for an hour. And I got out and I literally just felt like my best self. And I have no other way to put it. So I was just in this euphoric mood. I was in a flow state. And I just thought, wow, if, meditation's hard. So this was something where basically the environment meditates you. So I was just sold on their service so much that I thought, wow, other people have to try this, because if they even have 20% of the experience I had, they're going to be blown away. And so me, it was just really the service that sold it. And at that time, we didn't know, how great it was going to be for additional things like PTSD. The NFL is using it for concussions. Chronically depressed or anxious patients are using it, and there's just so many benefits. But at the time, we didn't know about those things. So I say, really, I just have a really high risk tolerance. And if I take a personality profile, you'll see my risk tolerance is about a 9 out of 10, which just means I'm at any given point ready to jump off a cliff to try anything new. And then fortunately, I have a wife that's there to kind of support me and put the parachute on, right? So.
Wow. So when you guys decided to do this, do you have any children, or did you have any children at that time, or is just the two of you?
I do have a 6-year-old daughter now, though at that time we didn't have any children.
Okay. And when you did this, when you put all your money into this business, how long did it take before you were financially okay? And I don't mean like, rolling in dough, but just okay to go from month to month and you're not like worrying how you're going to pay your bills.
Yeah, for sure. So we started in February 2010. And when we started this, it's a weird thing now. So back in 2010, when we started it, everyone thought we were absolutely crazy. So we'd tell people about this and they said, oh, is this sensory deprivation? And we said, yes, it's sensory deprivation, but we do have lights and music if you want to try it out. And everyone just thought we were completely crazy. So it was very hard to get customers. And so at that time, it took, a lot of effort just to get 1 or 2 or 3 people a day in to try it. So it took us a good solid, I would say 6 months, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months before we really started to see the business was gonna work. And at that point, we stepped away from working in the business, as you've heard, and we started working on the business. So once we were able to do that and really start marketing, we saw it turn around. So it took about a year and a half to kind of get to that point. And then in 2014, which was, 4 years later, we really started to feel like, okay, this is going to work. We're actually making good money at that point. We were able to pay off all the debt that we put into the business and pay back anybody that helped us along the way. So 4 years later, we were completely debt-free with that one store and felt like, phew, this actually worked.
Wow, that is so, that's so good. I'm like happy for you. That's amazing. So tell me the experience of going into the spa, because I've never heard of this before I, found you. So I'm like a person who knows nothing about this. So tell me exactly what this is. I walk into your spa and what happens?
So you're going to walk into a True Rest and you're greeted by a very, very friendly person. First off, you just take your sandals off, or your shoes off, and you get put into a room where you're going to watch a 7-minute video. This 7-minute video goes through everything you need to know about floating. A lot of people with chronic pain will have pain. They'll feel pain points more in the middle part of their float because their brain has nothing else to concentrate on. And then that will sort of dissipate throughout. But you basically just learn what floating is. So floating is basically very much like the Dead Sea. You're sleeping or just floating on the surface without any need to try. So it's totally safe to fall asleep. And so it's basically 1,000 pounds of magnesium sulfate, which is commonly known as Epsom salt, and 200 gallons of water. So you're creating an environment even more buoyant than the Dead Sea. So normal ocean water is 3% salt salinity to water volume. The Dead Sea is about 20 or so percent, and this is 30%. And so you literally just float on the surface of the water. The water is heated to skin temperature, which is 93.5 degrees, and then the air temperature and humidity are regulated. So what happens when you get into this water, it just feels, it's really hard to describe, but a lot of people actually describe it as a womb-like experience, believe it or not, where you just feel like you're in this perfectly safe kind of cocoon environment. So you get in after about 20 minutes, your brain has nothing else to focus on, and basically you can't really feel the difference between your body and the water. So you're just left in this kind of tranquil, peaceful state of euphoria. At that point, a lot of people can turn the lights off. You can turn the music off, but of course you're in full control of the experience. And then I just did a float actually before this podcast. It's been a stressful week. I got in. It's a full hour service. And I'm not joking, Nicole. I felt like I got in, the music kicked on, 7-8 minutes went by, and the music kicked back on, which means, your perception of time is just very different in the environment. And so it felt like 5 to 10 minutes, and I was in there for 60 minutes. So we've had people get out and check their watch and just be completely mind-boggled about how quickly the time goes in there. And then when you get out, you just feel like all the stress throughout the week has been completely stripped away. Your anxiety is down, blood pressure is down. And there's actually being research done at the LIBOR Institute in Oklahoma that's showing that if you leave the lights on, floating is equivalent to an anti-anxiety medication for up to 20 hours. And if you turn the lights off, it's as good as an antidepressant for up to 20 hours. So just a very, very relaxing experience.
Wow, that sounds relaxing. So if you don't know how to swim, you're okay, right?
If you don't know how to swim, you're totally okay. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. And you said like a cocoon-like situation. So are you closed in something in the water?
So you are in essentially a very large room to begin with. So when you walk in to the suite, we call it the float pod suite, you'll see it's this very large room. It's about a 14 by 12 room. There's a giant float pod in the middle of the room, and that is basically the size of a queen size bed. So each suite is completely private. So you have your own private changing area, you have your own private shower. They're very luxurious, very private. And then when you get into the float pod, you have the option of keeping the door open. You can shut the door, you can have music, lights, so you're in just total control of the experience. So we've had people that have said they're claustrophobic, but then when they actually go in and float, they find that because they're in full control and it's so big, they don't have any issues.
Okay. So do you just still have this one store, or have you expanded?
In 2015, we actually started franchising the concept. So I met my now business partner. He's actually the CEO of the franchising entity, Jim Rowe, and I'm the founder and president. And we grew it from 2015 from one store to actually 34 now open in 17 states. And we'll have 40 open by the end of this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is there one in New Jersey?
There is one in New Jersey. There's one in Brick.
Oh, I have to look that up. I don't know where that is, but I have to.
So there's one in Brick, New Jersey, and then there's one 40 minutes north of Brick. But yeah, look it up. If you go to TrueRest.com, you can easily search for all the locations. But there's actually, 2 in New Jersey right now.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm definitely going to look it up because I have to try this. Since starting your business and now you've grown and franchised and all of these other things, what are some struggles that you face on a daily basis, and how are you dealing with these issues?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. Once we started the franchise business, you're no longer in the business per se of offering the service. You're now in the business of selling franchises. And so there's just a big learning curve. So when we went from one store, we were doing very, very well with one store. That's how the franchising model works. And it was just about, okay, how do we scale? How do we bring on employees? So now the corporate entity has 10 employees, and then we manage actually 7 spas ourselves in 4 different states. And so there's just a whole lot of stuff you have to just figure out to make it all work. Now, the nice thing about franchising is that it's kind of this family in that, we can all share best practices. So I think a lot of the learning curve of growing and scaling is sort of eliminated with the franchising system. And so I can tell you, when we got our first spa really up and running and we were doing well, we were doing just over $500,000 in gross revenue, and we were netting 50%. And so now franchisees are on average netting 36%, but that's still very, very, very good for a franchise. Subways and food typically does, maybe low teens or under 10% in terms of their net. So really it's just kind of how to figure out how to grow and scale and keep the heart in the business, and just keep kind of everyone involved, I think, passionate and loving what they do.
Yeah. So what is the biggest lesson that you've learned to date that you apply to business and life, just from being an entrepreneur and always having that entrepreneurial spirit? What's something that you could say that, man, I learned this and this is something that I take with me every day?
Absolutely. So for me, the biggest thing is just you have to enjoy the journey. You can't worry about any kind of end results. And so I can say that anytime I try to focus on an end result, be it financially or some sort of goal, and you become obsessed with that, for me, it just instantly creates unhappiness. And so I just have to be happy in the moment, and I have to be happy with what I'm doing, or it's just a recipe for unhappiness, I think, every time. And so I have a friend who says, he talks about it from kind of a hiking analogy, and he says the summit is always a false summit. So once you reach the top of whatever the goal is that you're trying to achieve, you kind of look around and go, oh, shoot, now I have to climb back down the mountain, and you have to go hike another one. And so for me, it's just about really, really enjoying the process, not the end.
Okay. So in this age of social media, do you find that it helps with business, or are you guys on social media heavy, or are you doing like the old-fashioned marketing? What do you use?
So from a marketing standpoint, social media definitely has a huge impact. I would say currently, just in terms of marketing, 30% of all of our clients come from referrals. We get a large portion from discount sites like Groupon, Living Social, things like that. And then direct web search, Google, and social media represent a good, at least I would say 20% of our business or so. And I think actually social media is going to get more important, not less important. And one of the things we're doing now is we're really trying to approach different athletes and influencers and things like that, and really have them try to help spread the love of floating, basically. So I think social media is going to have a huge impact. I think in the future, it should represent about a third of all of our new business.
Oh, okay. So what, if anything, do you dislike about what you do every day?
So for me right now, I'm the founder and the president. And I don't know if I'd say dislike per se, but the challenge I have is I'm always trying to find new value adds. And so the challenge is, okay, how do we make the business better? How do we make the service better? And unfortunately, I just can't stop. So I always have to try to find something to make it better. And when I feel like we're stagnant or there's not been a value add for a while, that's the thing I dislike the most. So right now, what we're trying to do is we're basically going from just floating with music to really trying to integrate new kind of technologies into the float pod. So an example would be the Navy SEALs have taken learning a language from, believe it or not, 6 to 8 months down to 6 to 8 weeks using float pods. And they're able to put the brain in sort of this theta brainwave state, which is a super learning state, and then you can just retain information better. And so we're trying to figure out how to do things like this on a consumer basis. So imagine, Nicole, if you could come in and say 2 months later be semi-fluent in Spanish or Mandarin or some other language. And so for me, that's the biggest challenge, is kind of how do you take it to the next level?
Yeah, that would be amazing if I could do that. Another question I have with that, and I don't even know if you can answer this question, but it's like when you have a business and you're constantly thinking, how can I make this better? How can I make this better? When does that ever stop? Does it ever stop?
Not for me. It doesn't stop, which is, I think, a good thing. And also from an individual standpoint, it does kind of create anxiety, right? So for me, sometimes I have to stop, but yeah, I think it's when is enough is enough. So
Right.
One of the things my wife will say is kind of like, when is it going to be enough? And I'm not sure there isn't enough. I think it's just, you keep trying to make something better and better and better, obviously without hopefully stressing yourself out. But
Right. So, do you feel like you sacrifice anything to follow this dream and continue to work and build on it?
Sacrifice is an interesting word. And I would say that the one thing I've learned with uh, growing the business is it does require a lot of forbearance. And so there's definitely things you have to give up, be it your time. To your point earlier, if we had done this when we had a child, imagine trying to work 12 to 14 hours a day and you have a child at home,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's actually what my sister did. She has 3 kids. She opened up a store, and fortunately, she had family around her to support. But there was days where, she'd be working in the spa 12 hours a day, and her newborn, is well, there wasn't a newborn, but her toddler was at home with grandma and grandpa or something like that, right? So I would say if you want to do anything big, there's something that has to be sacrificed in your life. There's just no doubt about that for me. I don't think there's such thing as real balance. I think balance is over time. And so I have now done a lot of the prep work to have, flexible days and days off, but in the beginning, absolutely not. And so I think you do have to sacrifice and do things people aren't willing to do in the short term to get things that maybe, in the long term you want, which is what? Financial freedom, possibly the flexibility to do whatever you want. So, of course, yeah, there has to be sacrifice to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because some people, when I ask that question, they're like, "Oh, I don't sacrifice anything. Oh, I don't like that word or whatever." But it's like, I think
Right.
it just, it is what it is. You know.
Absolutely. Well, and I have friends that are far more successful than I am, but what they start talking about is it's not so much sacrifice, but it's just what can you tolerate? And so I have friends that say, look, the things I'm dealing with now, I can deal with, but if I had to deal with them 5 years ago, I'd have a nervous breakdown. So you kind of build this tolerance to problem solving. You build this tolerance to dealing with things, and that's a kind of an innate part of sacrifice. And then there's the whole, to do something really, really, really well means you can't do other things, and so it's an opportunity thing. So and a lot of entrepreneurs will call it, opportunity overload. There's so many hell yes things that which one do you say no to? And so I know friends that have literally sheets of paper that push them through a decision tree of here are the awesome things I can do today. Which 9 do I say no to? Right. And so it's either kind of like a hell yes or just a hell no. There's kind of no in between because there's so many opportunities. What do you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that you have friends that are way more successful than you are. Do you think that it's necessary to have successful friends or successful people around you that you can go to, even when you're not successful, in order to maybe get to that place? Or do you feel like it doesn't matter?
I feel like it's critical, and I really do believe that you're sort of the average of I think there's the expression like the average of the 10 people you hang out with. And Gary Vee talks about this kind of stuff all the time, and I absolutely agree. And so I think knowledge just kind of rubs off. And so you don't have to, read a book a day. As long as you're hanging out with people that have done something you want to do, you're going to get the nuggets of gold just by sort of hanging out with them. So I think it's absolutely something you should do. I mean, what are your thoughts on that one?
I'm still trying to figure it out. I was at a party the other day and the DJ said, "Oh, hug your friend, your rich friends." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I don't have any rich friends." Then I was like, I started thinking about it and I was like, do I need to have rich friends to maybe one day get to that place where I could say I'm rich? I mean, I know rich is relative, right? But I just know that I don't really have any rich friends. So it
Right.
just made me start thinking. And then, I like to get other people's opinion on it who are successful and doing well. So you're the first person that I asked that question. So that's a great perspective. I mean, yeah, it does rub off on you when you're around someone who's constantly talking about doing more, striving for more, and wanting, great things for their lives, for their life, you know, you kind of feel like, wow, that's motivating me, you know?
That's it. And I think that's the key to it, right? It is just a motivating factor, and it kind of keeps you going. And then there's that at every single level. And you know, it's funny. I have one friend who's relatively young. I would say he's 25, 26, and his goal is to basically be a billionaire one day, and that's his goal. And it's not for the money, but it's for the can he do it? So for him, it's just a challenge. And so what I've told him is I said, look, it's possible, but you basically do have to sacrifice everything in your life to get to that level. Literally, people don't get that, you know, once you get to that point, you've sacrificed decades of your life towards one central thing, not assuming you're doing something bad, of course, right? Or getting there through mischief means, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But if you're actually helping people, where a lot of billionaires will say the easiest way to become a billionaire is to help a billion people. And I kind of like more that approach, and just, you know, so it's just the exchange for helping. So the more virtue you put out in the world, the more virtue you get, essentially. But that means you had to sacrifice that much to get there, right? And so I always joke with him, and I just said, you know, I would never want to be that wealthy, because I kind of have an inkling on what it would take and what I'd have to sacrifice. And for me, it's just not worth the sacrifice.
Yep.
And so, you know, I have a life I like, and there's not a whole lot more I'd want to sacrifice to just have more influence in the world or more fame. You know, it's just not worth it for me.
That's a gem, Nick. That is so true. I always say that, like, you know, it's even like with just regular work. You get more money, it's more work, it's more of your time. It's like there's no way you're going to make, you know, millions of dollars and have a 9-to-5 gig. Like, it ain't happening. So,
right.
You know, if you want this, you're going to have to sacrifice something for it. And are you willing to? And that's what I always say to people. So, you know, do I want to be comfortable? Absolutely. But I really love the simplicity of my life, you know?
And you got to do something you love. I mean, the common entrepreneurial saying is, yeah, being an entrepreneur is great. You get to pick the 14 hours per day that you want to work.
Right.
You know, it's like, so it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, and I have this friend, Joe Polish. He has a mastermind, and he always says, if I had known how much work it is to be successful, I would have just stayed a loser.
Yeah, it's no joke, I'm sure. Like, I mean, people who have like all those big houses and houses all over the world, they probably never get to see them because
right, exactly.
You know, they're constantly working to keep up and make that money, and they just can't stop, you know. What do you look for in potential store owners? So if someone wants to get into the franchise business.
You know, it's interesting. We've had a lot of people come through. So we have almost 100 locations sold now under development. And what we've found is the ones that do the best are the ones that it's their life. It's not, you know, a part-time job for them. It's not, they have 10 other things on the side. This is like, they're all in life. Now, there are exceptions to that. We have an ER doctor in the Midwest who, you know, has family and friends that are all involved, and they all kind of run it together. And he's a full-time ER doctor. But, you know, the people that do the best are usually partners, husband and wife teams, you know, and they're kind of all in. And so they're doing this as kind of a passion business. They're able to get their first store really, really running well. And then they'll go open their second store, and then they'll go open their third store. And so it's really people that want to make this their career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just want to go all in, and then are super passionate about it. I think that's just so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you love what you're doing, then, you know, you're not even doing it for money. You're just, you know, do you feel like this is your purpose work?
I think yes. And I have, you know, a lot of other purpose work. So I've been doing tons of human rights work over the last 20 years. And I would say this is definitely one of them. So for me, I've said this, so I'm kind of woo-woo, I'm kind of out there sometimes, but I say for me, floating is a piece of the puzzle that is helping humanity kind of raise its overall consciousness. And what I mean by that is it's helping people understand that they're not the victim mentality, they're not their pain, they're not their chronic pain, they're not their anxiety, right? All these things we're feeling, we're not any of these things. We're just the observer of those things. And so I think floating is a piece of that. So without a meditation background, you can get in a pod 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 floats later, you're going to have what I call the magic float, where you kind of realize like, oh, wait a minute, I'm the observer of a lot of this stuff that I thought was me, that I associated with my identity. And then once you realize that, off to the races you go, right? You now have kind of a centralized purpose. And so that's definitely a huge piece of my purpose. Another one is definitely just human rights overall. And one of the biggest autocracies on the planet right now is what's happening in China. And so in China, in 1999, they banned a practice called Falun Gong. And there were 100 million people practicing it in the 90s. And they just made the practice illegal. It's like banning yoga. So they've been persecuting, torturing people for doing this for, almost 2 decades now. So a big part of what I do is also just kind of human rights, trying to get the word out about that. And then, the illegal organ harvesting. So in 2016, David Matas, who's a human rights lawyer, and David Kilgore, who is a former VP of Asia Pacific out of Canada, kind of like equivalent to our congressman, wrote a report, a 600-page report, documenting 40 to 50,000 people in China have their organs harvested every single year, not black market, but these are government-run hospitals. And it's just mind-boggling that stuff like that's still going on in the world. So I very much see the world as one floating spaceship, not divided by countries, and just, whatever we can do to help our brothers and sisters anywhere, we should do, regardless of, religious background, where they live, race, whatever it is. It's just we're all one human race.
So the organ harvesting, are they just like kidnapping people and doing this, or is it like people?
So in China, you can be arrested for being a prisoners of conscience, right? So there's a huge crackdown when Mao took over in the 40s of intellectuals first, then it was landowners next. So anybody that had something bad to say about the government, they actually formed a coalition where they said, hey, we're inviting all the intellectuals out. And come out. And so all these intellectuals came to this big coalition, and then they arrested them all and killed them, basically.
Wow.
And then so persecution in China is nothing new. And then you've heard of probably the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, and that's where Tank Man comes from. And that was just a bunch of university kids that were trying to speak up for freedom in China, and they were just kind of killed by the government at the time. And then Falun Gong was kind of the last big one, where they basically said, hey, we're people that believe in truth, compassion, forbearance. We believe that there is heavenly realms, and we're not going to be controlled by the government from the standpoint of membership rosters and all this stuff. They said, we don't charge money. The founder at the time said, we don't charge money, and we're not going to collect membership rosters. And so because the communist government couldn't accept that, they started breaking up groups, and then they banned it in 1999. And so now the same thing's going on with Christianity, with Muslims in China. Pastors are being arrested. And then, of course, everything that's going on in Hong Kong, right? So the world's in a very interesting place where, we just really need to protect freedom of thought and freedom of belief.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's so sad. I think that's awesome that you're doing that work and, trying to get that information out there so that people understand what's going on and can lend a hand however they can,
Oh, yeah, for sure. And awareness is a big part of it. I mean, this is stuff that, because it's not happening in this country, the media as a whole kind of doesn't cover it as much. There's an article here and there, but I mean, if you think about the numbers, the numbers could be very staggering, I think, when this comes out, where, in Nazi Germany, everyone's heard of the Holocaust, but, that's kind of going on in China right now. And so I think in the next decade or two, we'll kind of all reflect and just go, oops, we really can't let that kind of stuff happen again.
So I really enjoyed learning about your business. I'm so interested. I want to like do this for my husband. I want to do it. Do you have pods for kids?
Yeah, so I mean, under 18, obviously the parents just need to sign a waiver, but we do have kids coming in specifically for ADHD, even autism, younger kids, and certainly athletic kids are coming in. But we're finding a lot of benefits specifically with ADHD and, Asperger's and autism, things like that. The kids usually can't stay in quite as long as the adults. I would say 12, 13, 14 is probably a good age, and they may be able to stay in for half an hour or so. But yeah, I mean, it's still beneficial for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think even younger kids should start doing stuff like that because I just think if children learn how to like be mindful and they learn about meditation and things like that at a really young age, maybe it'll help them balance out all of those things that come about when they're going through their teens or just the pressures of school and other kids, and you know what I mean? I just feel like it would really help if they're just so aware of who they are
Absolutely.
and how to control themselves.
Well, I remember being a kid. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but because
It's a
we weren't
hard couple of years.
we weren't taught. Like there was nothing to really say. I mean, other than our parents just saying, "Oh, sit down and cut it out or whatever." But now there are so many different techniques and so many different things that people are discovering. I just think if you teach your children, like at a young age, you try to, practice with them and teach them certain things, it'll be helpful to them.
Absolutely, and that's the fun of raising a kid. Is just you get to see them grow, and you're kind of molding that. And what's I can absolutely say is true. They absolutely have their personalities. I do not think, and I could be wrong. I mean, obviously behavior is one thing, right? But personality is a whole nother thing. I mean, my daughter had her personality at 2.
Right.
She was herself, and it is amazing just to see that part grow.
Yeah. They definitely do have that little personality, but I don't know. It's like I try to teach my daughter about how to handle people who are not very nice. And, I just tell her how to be in control of herself. I mean, it's not 100% because, like you said, they have their personalities and whatever. But I do find, like, I went in her room and she posted up all of these things on the wall. You know that saying, keep calm and whatever. So she found a bunch of positive ones and she put them all up on her wall. And I thought that was amazing. I'm like, my teachings are working. Like,
That's awesome.
So just even.
How old's your daughter?
She's 9.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like any little positivity or self-control that we can teach our children, you never know when it's gonna, resonate with them or it's gonna, save them in a moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so funny. My daughter the other day, she was saying, "Oh, I was talking to my friend about this thing, and she had, what'd she call it? She said, she had love tears." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're so cute."
That is cute. It was great talking to you. I always ask all my guests to share an oh hell no moment that they've had along their journey, right? We have tons of them. They can be positive, they can be negative, but I want you to share a moment that you were like, oh hell no, and it either changed your perspective on something or taught you a lesson.
Sure. So with the business, yeah, I mean, you're right. There's so many of them. I'm trying to remember one now that stands out. Well, I want to do a positive one. So, of course, with oh hell no's, you're thinking of all the negative stuff, right? So here's a good one. So, oh hell no moment was we were originally located in a very, very, very high rent location. And basically we were left with a decision. It's either close down because we're not doing as well as we need to in the very beginning, or we have to find a new location and basically start all over again. And so my Hell No movement was, no, we're not going to shut down. We're going to continue to grind away. We're going to drive the streets for months and months and months trying to find a location and a landlord that will help us build out a new location. So it's really the hell no, we're not going to quit, and we're just going to keep going to make this thing work.
Awesome. See, that's a great oh hell no moment. I love it. Some people have positive ones.
Yeah, I know. I thought of a bunch of negative ones at first, but that's a good one.
So tell everyone where they can learn more about your spas, find a location, and keep up with what's happening.
Sure. So we are in 17 states right now. Our website is TrueRest, TrueRest.com. And REST is actually an acronym for Restricted Environmental Stimulus Therapy, but TrueRest. So yeah, just go ahead and you could go to Google and search for Float Spa, or you can go to TrueRest.com and search for your local location.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show.